Okay, so let's get into this. Mr. Max Bailey. Mr. Bailey is joining us today. He is the CEO of Call the Underwriter. He is in beautiful Montana right now. So if you're looking at his background, that is not a screensaver or a background from Zoom. That is his actual backyard or part of his acreage, I should say. But he is I've used Max multiple times or Call the Underwriter multiple times and when originating a loan. And there are certain rules and regulations that you have to follow to ensure that you are Dodd Frank compliant. Otherwise, you could be fined, you could be put in jail. You could be looking as though you are predatory and you're lending to people who just don't qualify for your loan. So these are things that you have to do and have things properly underwritten. And so you have to go to an RMLO, which Mr. Bailey will explain to you who he is and do the proper underwriting. And so I'm going to hand it over to him to tell us who he is, what he does, and how he can help keep you compliant when you, one, not only just originate a loan, but also purchase a loan after a certain date. That note still needs to be Dodd Frank compliant. So Mr. Bailey, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Tanya. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you all. I appreciate you having me. I'll give you a little bit of a spiel and then I'll open it up and answer any questions that y'all have. The other thing is Tanya can give you my contact information and you're welcome to call or email me if you have questions. Or the other thing you can do is go to our website, calltheunderwriter.com, and you can contact us through that if you have questions after reviewing the video and the things on the website. So as Tanya said, I'm the owner of Call the Underwriter. Our primary area of service is helping ensure Dodd Frank compliance for note originators like yourself. Dodd Frank was a piece of legislation born in 2010, shortly after the housing bubble burst ended, and Congress was tasked with dissecting the mortgage industry and determining the causative factors that led to the housing bubble burst, and to subsequently create legislation to attempt to remedy that so that we wouldn't have it happen again. And so everything you see in Dodd Frank is essentially a piece of legislation designed to pick out those chief things they think were problems in the industry and create prohibitions to them and create regulations to ensure that lenders consider a borrower's capacity and ability to repay a loan. Prior to Dodd Frank, if you've been around the banking industry very long, you probably remember stated income loans, and they even had no income loans. They had all kinds of crazy loans out there, teaser rates, all kinds of predatory lending. And essentially, the only regulation on loaning to someone was the investor side that would put certain stipulations in to ensure that the loan officer wasn't going to put the lender's money at risk. But all of the risky features in the loan were designed to stack the deck in the favor of the lender, right? So adjustable rate mortgages, even reverse amortization, prepayment penalties, balloons inside of 60 months, all kinds of risky features that were routinely done in loans, and they always advantaged the lender to the peril of the borrower. And so Dodd-Frank legislation, among other things that it did, is it identified many of the risky features in lending and tweaked them or flat out prohibited them in owner-occupied properties. So when we're talking about Dodd-Frank, it's important to remember not all loans fall under Dodd-Frank. The only loans that fall under Dodd-Frank are owner-occupied of 1 to 4 family. So We do a lot of underwriting for investment properties as well. And there's reasons to still bring your deal to us if it's not an owner occupied property. Then we're looking after your interest. Essentially, we're vetting your borrower for, again, capacity to pay, so that your risk of default is lower. But it also creates a good collateral underwriting file for helping you resell that note. All the savvy note buyers are going to want to look at a professionally underwritten collateral file. But when we think about Dodd Frank, we're specifically talking about owner occupied families, 1 to 4 family units. And so when you think of Dodd Frank, just think about if your lending could result in somebody becoming homeless, then it falls under Dodd Frank. If it's just an investment property for them, the government doesn't have the same stance. And so really what we're doing when we underwrite for you, if you acquire let's say a single family residence, and the borrower you get plans on occupying it as their primary home, the government tells you, the lender, that the onus is on you now to ensure the borrower can meet the demands of the loan. Whereas prior to Dodd Frank, that was a borrower's responsibility. And so if a borrower came to a loan officer and expressed that he made $10,000 a month, that lender was under no obligation to, unless his own company told him to for their risk. But governmentally, he was under no obligation to ensure that that borrower was being honest about that $10,000 a month. And so if they put you into a loan and 3 months into it, the borrower can't meet the payments anymore and quits performing on the loan, it was, there was just no recourse on that. They took the house and they threw the person out, and nobody thought twice. And so subsequent to Dodd Frank, everything now is about protecting borrowers. And so what our company does is help your company stay compliant with the intent and spirit of Dodd Frank, which is to brand you as a non-predatory lender, to help you build consistent, transparent underwriting files from deal to deal that will stand up in court, that aren't riddled with the prohibited risky features. And the big picture is that you're going to have a much lower default rate. You're not creating notes that won't sell once you've created them, and you're typically not going to be creating notes that are going to turn into non-performing notes. Dodd Frank identifies 8 general underwriting criteria that it tells you that you as the lender are responsible for ensuring. And these relate to things like borrower's credit history, credit worthiness, to your work history, to your income history, and then a credit report that talks about all of their other assets and liabilities, getting them within a reasonable debt to income ratio, and then ensuring that they can meet a state specific residual income. And residual income is a factor that would sort of represent, what does this family have left to buy gas and groceries and food at the end of their month? So one of the calculations that we do, and this can have a big bearing on qualifying people, is that residual income calculator. Obviously, a family of 7 is going to require far more base income to support the same house than a family of 2 is. And so when you guys are looking for borrowers, you always want to be cognizant of that, the bigger the house, let's say, and the bigger the family unit that is applying, the more gross income they're going to need every month to meet that residual income figure than if you get a single person, or you get a man and a wife and no dependents. And so, not that as a lender that it's that you can play games and discriminate on people, but I just say it from a standpoint of trying to make you aware of the fact that and our pre-screening guide on the website will help you do it as well. But it's really important to understand enough about people's residual income after they've paid the PITI of your loan and then paid all the debt that's on their credit report. They've still got to have something left over to live on. And the government now says that's your responsibility. And so what we do is we help you pre-screen your borrowers. I can teach you formulas that will help you, sort of get an idea early on when you're first starting to advertise the asset, how much gross monthly income a borrower probably needs per month to be reasonably likely to meet requirements. And then we can show you how to pre-screen that borrower and then send the entire package to us for underwrite. So that's sort of Dodd Frank in a nutshell. We do other things as well. We help loan money for your future investing needs, bridge loans, lines of credit, gap funding, down payment, fix and flip money. We also help you sell your notes if when you're creating the note, you let me know that you want to resell it. And sometimes the conversations we have are different if you tell me you want to resell the note than if you tell me you plan to create the note and hold it forever. And so that's important to know ahead of time. I'll go ahead and open it up and you all can ask me some questions. And then just know that when we're done here, if you want to see what a loan submission looks like, you can just get onto our website, calltheunderwriter.com, and watch that little video on the front. And that'll sort of walk you through the 2 or 3 step process in having your borrower apply on our website, pre-screening your borrower, and sending us the terms to the deal. So we've made it pretty simple and streamlined for you when you're ready to go to submit an underwriting application to us. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
Thank you. That was a great overview. Any questions?
It really was a great overview. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. How do FICO scores play into this?
Yeah, great question. While FICO scores themselves are not mentioned in Dodd Frank, in other words, given the other right criteria, we can qualify somebody that has no credit score. We can qualify somebody that has a 380 credit score. But it still is incredibly important for you for a lot of reasons. And I always tell my investors, when in doubt, absolutely go for the higher credit score. So if you've got 2 different borrowers, whoever indicates to you that they think they have the stronger credit score is going to be in your interest to go for it for a couple of reasons. Number one, it is absolutely indicative of problems in these people's past, right? And like they say, the best indicator of future performance is review of past performance. So although there are anomalies, there's people that were just trucking along doing great and then got cancer and medical bills ate them alive and they had to go bankrupt and their credit went into the toilet and now they're back on their horse and they're riding and they're over all that, but they still bear the scars of that that sort of unilateral event. And part of our pre-screening is to teach you how to sift that out and make a determination on why the credit score is low. And just a low credit score in and of itself, if they have a really good reason, there was a great life event that they can point to that is the result of that credit score, but now you can look at everything and see that they're back up and going and that's behind them. It's not that somebody with a low credit score can't fly. Like I said, we make them fly all the time, but they're going to have far more loan conditions to meet than somebody with a higher credit score. So it's going to definitely cause you more work. It's going to cause us more work. And it's going to take you longer to get to the closing table with a borrower with a lower credit score. The other thing that we can't do with a low credit score is we just can't make that look like a really attractive note for resale. So I've got a lot of note buyers out there that will snatch up your guys' notes as quick as I can make them if you help me follow criteria and try to keep these credit scores above about 615 or 620. If all else is strong, we can help you sell those notes with the least amount of discount. But folks that bring them to me that, you know, wander through the Skid Row district and hand a loan application out to everybody with a pulse, a lot of those that come to me, even if we can manage to squeak them by and get them certified ability to repay the loan, a credit score that low will almost always stop you from selling the note, or at least you'll have to hold it and season the hell out of it so that this person has a new track record that says, hey, we created this note with them a year ago and they haven't been late a single time on their payment in 12 months, and it's now very well seasoned. So just know that credit score won't necessarily kill your deal, but it's definitely an indicator of problems.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions? I have a question regarding, if you could go over again, the selling directly to a consumer who's going to live in the property versus selling to someone who is going to rent out the property. Is that selling
Yes.
from LLC to LLC versus LLC to consumer?
Right.
And how many can you do in a year?
Great question. Okay. The how many you can do in a year doesn't change. So it's still the same. And there's a lot of confusion out there on that whole issue in Dodd Frank that talks about unlicensed activity. So what the law says is that you're responsible to ensure that your borrower meets ability to repay on every single one you do. Even if you're only doing one, you're still responsible to make sure that you're not violating Dodd Frank's ability to repay, and that you don't have risky features or prohibited features in your loan, even if you only do one. But if you're going to do more than 3 in a 12-month period, then the law says that you have to also originate that with a licensed RMLO. So we offer 2 different services. One is the standard underwrite, and
Could you explain what an RMLO is?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, an RMLO is a residential mortgage loan originator. Some people just call it an LO, loan originator, or an MLO, but the R stands for residential. So an RMLO is just a fancy term for somebody with an NMLS number, a regulated licensed loan originator. And what we do is, I think I told you earlier, Tanya, the vast majority of seller finance, last year, seller finance did close to $30 billion in business in the US. So it's now becoming a fairly sizable market, even though it's still a micro market. $30 billion split between us, you know, as small of a community as we are. That's a pretty big chunk we're writing every year. Over 80% of that $30 billion is done by people doing less than 3 in a 12-month period. So most of you don't have to worry about having an RMLO license. You're not probably going to do more than 3 in a 12-month period. And so we try to keep things as affordable and simple as possible. So for the vast majority of you, we just do the ability to repay underwrite, ATR certification, that is. We underwrite it and we do your closing docs if you need closing docs done. But for the higher volume people cranking out, you know, 10, 15 of these a month or whatever, the higher volume people, the law says that they have to have theirs originated by a licensed originator. We offer that service as well, but because we're not licensed in all 50 states and no individual lender that I know is, we've affiliated with a lender that can originate in all 50 states. And so then what we do is we do the underwrite and certifiability to repay. And then we forward that on to our licensed affiliate in that state. And they put their NMLS number on it and list themselves as the loan originator. And then at closing, they make an assignment back to you as the note holder. And so that's a more expensive service. And again, I don't try to push that one unless I feel that we really need it. But that's what happens if you're originating big volume.
And just to follow up with that, when you say that's a big expense, what are your overall expenses if someone is just originating one note? And can those expenses be charged back to the borrower?
Yes, all of them can be passed on to your borrower. They're what the law calls bona fide costs of credit. So they can all go back to your borrower. But the law does say that you can't charge a borrower anything before offering them a loan. So you want to be really careful. I've had a lot of investors that try to tell me, well, just invoice my borrower. And we always stop them and say, we can't do that. That's a violation of res puntilla. So what happens is we invoice you up front. We recommend that you take $1,000 earnest money deposit from your borrower. And that's smart business anyway, just to ensure that they have skin in the game and that they're serious about it. So the order would be, you'd acquire the asset, you'd advertise the asset, you'd pre-screen borrowers, you'd select a borrower, you'd take earnest money and sign a contract with the borrower, then you'd come to us. And so, take $1,000 earnest money deposit from your borrower, and then you're going to pay our fee up front. And then that goes on your borrower's column of the settlement statement, and it becomes a closing cost for them. So then you get it back again at closing.
Awesome. That's good to know. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Does anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, my apologies. Can we back up just quickly? What was
Sure.
that? What was that volume again when the RMLO is required by the law?
Yeah. So when it has to be originated by a licensed lender is when you're doing more than 3 in a 12-month period.
Okay, so on
So
the fourth one.
If you do 2 the rest of this summer, or even do 3 the rest of this summer and fall, and you don't do another one until after January 1st next year, you're not under that.
Okay, so it's
So-
calendar year. Okay.
Yep. Well, it's a 12-month rolling, 12-month rolling.
Rolling.
So
Okay.
in a 12-month period is the way it's worded. The good news is there's a lot of talk about how ridiculous that limit is. And some of the big names in the industry that I work closely with have the ear of Congress, and it's being proposed that they're going to move that to 24 per year. So hopefully we all cross our fingers and pray that happens. That's going to make life a little bit easier. That would mean, like, if you look at my fee schedule on the website, you'll see 3 services. You'll see a standard underwrite, and you'll see the closing doc package, and then you'll see the full loan origination. So most of the time we can get by with just the underwrite and the closing doc package. And hopefully you won't need to worry about the full loan origination. But if you do, the thing to do is you'd know going into it ahead of time what it's going to cost, and factor that into your margins as you're writing your deal up, and then it's something that you pass on to your borrower.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
The floor is open for questions.
I was wondering what the difference would be if you're going to keep it forever, or if you're thinking of selling it on later. What's the difference for what you would do with the loan?
You bet. Yep. Okay. Several differences. So when you're trying to resell a note, there's a lot of things that matter to a buyer. The asset itself, right? The quality of the asset, the location of the asset matters. what state it's in. Is it in a judicial or non-judicial foreclosure state? Those all matter. The credit of the borrower matters. In some cases, you know, those are probably the big ones, but the length of the term, the interest rate matters a ton to a note buyer. It might not matter to you. I'll give you an example. I was writing notes 4 or 5 years ago when interest rates, the APOR was down around, 3%. So we had note creators feeling great about writing notes at 6%. Well, good luck selling one of those notes now that's at 6%. So the length of the term, right? The shorter, the better when you're trying to resell a note. But if you want to hold the note, not necessarily, maybe a longer term is better for you. And so there's a whole lot of criteria that matter to a note resale that might not matter to you personally. And so that's why I always say, have an idea what you want to do with this note, or maybe you decide you want to recapitalize, you want to sell off a first lien to, get your money back, pay off your debt or any expenses you had in the deal, and then, or to gain enough capital to rinse and repeat and do your next deal. So maybe you want us to build 2 notes, a first and a second, and you want to get 50,000 back out of the first, and you want to carry back a note and keep it long term that's for the 150 second note. And so same thing, then the way we write that is going to be a little bit different if you want to resell it than if you tell me, nope, I'm just planning to write this and keep it forever.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone else have questions? Max, what made you get into this line of work?
Boy, I ask myself that every day. Well, I was a firefighter for 30 years, and so I had a lot of time off, and so I always did rental properties on my days off, and I got a finance degree, and just kind of always on my days off wanted to do something, totally different from what I did 48 hours a week. And so I kind of got into creative finance and buying and selling rental properties and that kind of thing. And then that led me to the whole underwriting gig. And yeah, so I fell into it, honestly, over kind of accidentally over a course of probably 25 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah. And I'm in the process of selling rental properties now and turning those into notes myself. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Okay, the floor is open. Does anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. This is Regis. Sorry, my kids, they were kind of wild. But yeah, I had a question in regards to, after doing the underwriting, like, have you ever had any investor come back to you because they weren't happy with how things turned out, or how does that work? Like, are there any horror stories or?
No, not like that. There's been a few horror stories related to, people not taking our advice, and then later bringing another deal to us and saying, I'll never not listen to you again because not taking your advice on, such and such has really bit us. But, when we deliver a thoroughly underwritten report, if anything, we're overly conservative. So you're not going to get a person in the property that, you're going to find out a month later is already defaulted on the loan and you can't believe it. So yeah, we're not encountering anything like that. The biggest thing would be, just there's a lot of people that, take our suggestions and coaching and apply it. And then once in a while you run into somebody that's not apt to do that. They come to you, but then they don't want to take the advice. And so once in a while they get burned doing that.
Got it.
Did you mention a pre-qualification checklist or something of the sort on
Yes.
your website?
Yes, ma'am. Under the investors tab on the website, you'll see a borrower's pre-screening guide. I highly recommend that you weave that into your process. So once you are ready to advertise the asset, I would pre-screen every borrower that you decide to consider moving forward with. And I wouldn't sign a contract or take earnest money from anybody that doesn't pass that pre-screen. And that'll give you probably a 95% likelihood that the people you take earnest money from and send all the way to us, we're going to be able to qualify them.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
One other question I had, when you say your borrowers you can send the borrower to your site to complete the forms?
Yes.
Okay. And so
Yep.
when that happens, you all get all of the information. You ask for their employment, you ask for them to give you permission to pull their credit, and you ask for any debt that they may have. You get all of that information.
Yeah, that's actually all in the application. So
Okay.
when they fill out our loan application, they're answering some questions at the beginning of that loan application. One is, do they give us authorization and consent to pull their credit? You know, two is a little warning to them that if they're not 100% truthful on that form, they're committing a federal crime called
Okay.
mortgage fraud,
Okay.
punishable by a year in prison and $100,000 fine. So same thing, if your borrower is lying on that form, that's sort of you and I's get out of jail free card, right? Because you only have the best information they gave you, and I only have the best information they gave me. And so that form essentially warns them that to omit or withhold any known debts or liabilities or information, or let's say they don't have a job, but they claim they do, or, you know, whatever, they fabricated their W-2 from last year to make it look bigger. Any of those things that you and I can't prevent,
Mhm.
they're committing a felony. And so, yep, they fill that out. They go to the website, they go to the borrower's application link and they click it. They fill out a loan application, they upload their income right there. And when they push submit, that comes to us and lands on our pipeline. And then we marry that up with what you send us on the other one. So you get into the website and click on the investors tab and send us the term sheet. And that term sheet comes to us the same way. So that's you giving us all the information to the deal,
Okay.
what the loan amount is going to be, the property address, all the details of the deal. And then their application and your term sheet both come together and we marry those up into the loan file. And then the
Okay.
first thing we do when we get both of those, we go through it all. We look for any kind of problems we see or any missing information. And then we write an email to you and the borrower, and we call that a needs list. And basically we would write to both of you and say, you know, thank you for the loan application. We've reviewed everything. In order to complete the review of the income and credit for this loan, we're going to need the following items. And then we would delineate out for each of you anything that we need. And then we sort of pinned it right there until we get that information in. And then we go to work on the file.
Seems easy enough.
Yeah, we do 30 or 40 of them a month. They seem to crank right through.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? I have just one more. I guess I have. So is there any ramifications? I think it's if you're purchasing a note after, was it like 2014 or something like that, it still has to be compliant or Dodd Frank compliant. Are there any ramifications if you purchase a note and you don't know, or you're not sure if they did the underwriting, or has there ever been a case where the borrower has said, you know, they knew I couldn't afford it, and then they try to come after?
Yep. Yeah. So from a personal standpoint, doing your own due diligence, you know, you'd want to vet that and review that. And that's another reason why holding a collateral file that comes from us makes your note so much more sellable. But there really is no way to go back and make a note compliant that wasn't, because it would require the borrower consenting to jump through all these hoops, right? And the borrower can easily say, no, I'm not interested in filling out a credit application and having you pull my credit and giving you all my income. I've already been in this house for 5 years. You can't make me.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people come to me and say, you know, hey, we've got 100 notes we wrote over the years and they weren't compliant and we're worried. Can you turn them all compliant for us now? And then I have to tell them, well, the only way I could do it is if you would incentivize your borrower to cooperate. And in a few cases, we've done that, but then there's a risk to that too, right? Because then you open up a can of worms and you have your borrower that's already been in there 5 years apply, and let's say they don't qualify.
Yeah.
And now you've got an even bigger problem because now you've got a new file built by us that's recorded that says your note's not compliant. So my advice, if you're buying notes, would be that you make your own criteria that, just like the savvy note investors, you won't buy a note that's not Dodd Frank compliant. But if you did, my understanding is you're not responsible for the fact that it's not compliant. You can't
Okay.
make it compliant. But it is important to understand that every state has debt holder laws, and some states require that you have a debt holder's license to even own a loan in that state. So you want to be, you know, you want to do some due diligence. Don't just go buying a note in Indiana if you've never been in Indiana just because it looks like a good deal. Research it and make sure that you're allowed to own a loan without a debt holder's license in Indiana. Find out if Indiana is a foreclosure or a non-judicial foreclosure state, right? What happens when you get that note and they're a judicial foreclosure state and it's nearly impossible to foreclose on a borrower? So, you know, those are the things I would really pay attention to if you decide to just go out and buy notes.
And could you explain just a little bit further for those who may not understand that a debt collector or a debt license, and that some people have to have, you have to have them in certain states? I believe Kentucky is one of those states. You had mentioned Indiana,
Yeah, I
and
believe
a lot of
Georgia,
states are starting to
maybe
follow
Alabama.
suit.
There's a growing number of states that require specific licensure to hold debt. And so a lot of the big note buyers just X off entire states now and say, we won't buy notes in that state. So again, when you're creating notes, that's another thing you want to look at, right? When you're creating notes is what kind of states am I going to create notes in that are going to sell like hotcakes if I choose to sell? And the one gentleman asked a question earlier, James, I believe it was, about how do we write notes different if they're for resale than if you want to retain it forever yourself. That's another great case in point. An example would be if you're in a you know, judicial foreclosure state and getting rid of somebody is tough. Well, if you're creating a note in that state and you tell me my intent is to sell it right away, well, then I'll try to reach out right away and make sure there's buyers that are happy with owning notes in that state, because some people just tell me flat out, nope, we don't want a note in this state. So
Wow.
all things to think about for sure.
It is definitely. And that's even for the single note buyer. You still sometimes have to be licensed in certain states to be able to have that debt and own it.
Yep. And the other thing is, I mean, if that note, definitely if it's non-performing, that's a whole nother, you know, can of worms to get into. But if it's not non-performing, in the event that it becomes non-performing, do you want to have to try to take back an asset in that city, county, state? And there's certain city, county, states out there I would not want to have to go after and try to take back an asset. And your story earlier, you know, was sort of a good example of that. And Texas is actually a highly favorable state for creating, owning, and selling notes. And you still ran into a fairly tough runaround.
Yep.
Imagine some of the states that are extremely sympathetic to the poor family in every case and view the note holder as a, you know, gazillionaire tycoon.
Exactly.
And everything is always in favor of the poor victim borrower. Boy, I'd want to know that before I bought a note in a state like that or in a county like that, where in the event that I need to take back the asset, I can't.
Exactly. New York, New Jersey.
Yep. And so when you're creating notes, that's one of the things, I guess, that, you know, big foot stomp that I would try to leave you all with is that I work for you. And so when you bring a deal to me, I'm right there with you helping make sure that we create you a note that's not going to default and that's going to be easy to manage, that's going to be legal, and that if you choose to sell it, is going to sell well. So we're trying not to, let you get into problems. But once in a while, that means we're going to give you a suggestion that is inconvenient to hear. And so then you kind of have to, when you get that suggestion, you kind of have to think it out and say, okay, he's recommending we have this thing, third-party service by a professional servicer, and I didn't plan on doing that. And okay, I better think that out a little bit before I just ignore that advice.
Awesome.
So just to clarify, Dodd Frank compliance is required when generating a note or when purchasing a note that was generated post, what's the date?
Well, 2010 is when Dodd Frank came about. And so anybody loaning money on an owner-occupied property after 2010 is required to ensure their borrower meets ability to repay, ATR.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a question. For the states that require the debt holder license, and I know it will vary by state, how difficult is it to get that license?
That I do not know. My guess is it's probably going to be similar to getting an RMLO license. In some cases, they require bonding, insurance, reporting yourself to the state and going through their regulatory process, having your books examined by them. Most people that I know of in these kind of small time deals we're all doing, they just end up choosing to ignore those states and move away because they don't want to have to play that game for maybe owning one note.
And my understanding is that the fees are kind of ridiculous. Well, not ridiculous, but they're pretty high just if you want to be in there for one note or two notes.
Yep. Yep.
Any other questions, concerns? Anybody? All right. Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Max. Appreciate it. This was really great information. And it's always good for me to hear it from the source who originated it, because sometimes I'll throw stuff there and I'm like, okay, I hope this is right. But it's good to know, get the information and hold that information and actually have someone who is knowledgeable and can walk you through it. And I think that's what we try to teach here and show people, that you have resources all around you to help you out, and that you don't have to go about it on your own. You can be compliant. You have people that'll work with you and get this done for you, where you don't have to be concerned with, am I doing this right? Am I not doing this right? So this was extremely great information. I thank you so much. For those of you who want to get in contact with Mr. Bailey, you can go to Call the Underwriter. I did drop it in the chat, to calltheunderwriter.com, or if you have any further questions, just drop something in their contact and they will reach out to you. So any follow-up, anything, last minute words? You all are quiet. If there are no last minute words, then we can go ahead and sign off. Once again, thank you so much, Max. Appreciate you, appreciate your knowledge, and appreciate what you have built to help people in this industry. So thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely. Nice to meet you all. I appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Indeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max. Thank
I'll
you,
see you all
Tanya.
later. Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone.
You're welcome. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.